on what we call smart food. Part of our aim was that we wanted to bring millets back as a staple. Because we recognise that through staples, that's how you can have bigger impact. And there were a lot of people, a lot of organisations working on the multitude of different forgotten foods and baskets of lots, which is absolutely needed. We thought it would complement if we had a dedicated focus on bringing millets back as a staple, which is a different approach as what's needed. And, well, we wanted to do it because we thought it could have bigger impact. The biggest challenge that we had is what I call the food system divide. And what that is just like you might have an education divide or a digital divide. With the food system divide, there'd been a lot of investment into the big three, the wheat, maize and rice. So, of course, their value chains are well developed. They do well. And the better they do, then it attracts even more investment. And so it does even better. So it attracts more investment and so on. So they're extremely well set up. They have good value chains. They have a lot of investment. And so it becomes very difficult for something else to break into that and to be in mainstream, because that was our aim. How could we get millets in mainstream? And that means they have to be affordable, they have to be accessible, they have to be available, they have to be on scale, price comparative, etc. So that's very, very challenging. And that's why we also recognised we had to focus on one particular crop, one particular forgotten food, or what we call smart food, because to really be able to compete and break through that food system divide, you needed really big dedicated effort and investment. And we saw millets as the best thing to focus on first, because they're what we call good for you, good for the planet, and good for the farmer. So just the criteria of how super, super healthy and nutritious they were, particularly targeting the needs of women and children because of the high iron, the high zinc, the good protein levels, and then the finger millet, which has got extremely high calcium. So it targeted some of the biggest needs as well. Okay, so what I did was my aim was working at driving the demand side first, not working initially as much with farmers, because I wouldn't have gone, and this is back 13 to 15 years ago, wouldn't have gone to farmers to say, oh, please grow more millet, because the market wasn't as developed. Now, of course, that varies by country, and in some countries the millets actually are quite major. So I'm generalizing. So our aim was, how could we drive demand? Now, we weren't the sort of organization that could go out and do big consumer advertising campaigns, of course. So the aim was to influence everyone along the value chain. We needed to influence government. We needed to influence food processors. We needed to influence researchers. We needed to influence development agencies. We needed to get everybody excited and interested for them to invest in millets along that whole value chain and the support that's needed. So that sort of became a lot of the focus. So it was about influencing all. Now, some of the components we needed for our advocacy to have any effect was we recognised we needed the scientific backing behind any claims. So, to really say that millets are good for you, the planet and the farmer, what sort of scientific backing do we have? And we had a fantastic team and a great head nutritionist, and we have done the largest nutrition and health studies in the world on millets. What we did was a series of what's called systematic reviews and meta-analyses, which really is just a study of all the studies, rather than just adding one more small study to the pile. It was, let's study everything that has been done to see what can we claim, where are the gaps, what do we know or not know. And so we have a lot of data on the nutrition side and quite a bit on the environment side as well. We also worked a lot with small and medium enterprises, a lot of startup companies. What we find with industries that aren't as developed, that it's the SMEs that really are the pioneers. The big companies only come in later, although we did work with some big companies too, and that also is important. But what we find is those small and startup companies, they struggle just as much as the farmers struggle. In some countries, there's quite a lot of support for startups, but there's very little support to help them scale. And so it's very difficult for them to really to go further than just start up and be a very micro business. And we had a lot of ideas for that. But I think your app model is one of those innovative models that can actually help people scale. And I think that's what's one of the very, very big exciting parts of what I read about what you're doing. Another part is branding was extremely important. So we branded this smart food and we made a global movement out of it. And so we did lots of activities in many countries, in many regions, and all different types of activities. And we always use that smart food branding. We had ambassadors, and we had ambassadors at different levels. We had, well-known people. We had the First Lady of Niger, to chefs, all the way through to when we did projects on the ground in villages, and we had smart food ambassadors there, which village people who became the ambassadors to spread the word. So it was really exciting using the ambassador sort of approach. We found the best way to influence was to integrate into other projects rather than just seeing ourselves on our own. So where others were doing projects, say working with communities or working in other groups, how could we be a component with them? And then you could actually do a lot more. We experimented with a lot of different activities. So, for example, in Kenya, on national television, prime times, 4 p.m. every Sunday, we ran a reality TV show, which we used the branding Smart Food. And so we got lots of prizes donated. We had some of their celebrity people and chefs, run a competition, and people had to cook with millets and legumes. And it attracted a lot of young people. And we matched that with getting a social influencer involved as well, social media influencer. I think what we learned, it was effective, but I think a lesson learned of what we didn't get right, because just as important what we didn't get right, we should have linked up with retailers to make sure the ingredients and products were available. So if we got people excited about doing something, to be able to access and act on it themselves was important. Now, so we should have thought of that whole sort of connection. There were Niger, we got Niger excited, and they started running annual millet fairs with all sorts of people, from researchers to chefs involved. We ran conferences. We did the first scientific studies of millets in school feeding programs, and there we were smart enough to connect them to the farmers, so there could be sustainability post the project. We had, and then what Francois mentioned, we were looking for ideas of what could be bigger triggers to getting more attention. And that's where we came up with the idea, could we get an International Year of Millets? And had to learn the process of how you do it and start that. And we were pretty excited that came about. But it's not enough. We've got to keep going. But it certainly brought a huge amount of attention to millets. What we see as what I see as some of the next big areas needed is, if we really want to go to scale, how we help the SMEs with the products, because those SMEs that are creating products, how they can scale. The products are critical to change the image of the millets, to popularize it, to make it exciting. Never lose fact that this is about marketing. Just like the big companies do marketing for the big products, this has to think it's the same. It's not a development project. This has to think true marketing, and how you can help and do things there. We felt that this is the stage where now we really do need to be focusing on how you can make it more cost effective for the farmers, how you can make sure the researchers are working on significantly increasing the yield and the production, productivity, etc. So that's really needed now. Just to end on a couple of the risks that I would advocate and push very strongly. We know millets and many of the other forgotten foods are super healthy. However, many foods start off healthy. It's what we do to them after. Like rice is actually naturally quite healthy, but it's what we do to it. We refine it, we polish it, we take out half the nutrients, we take out the fiber, we make it high glycemic index, so it's bad for diabetes, there's very little nutrient left, and so on. And it's not rice that's actually unhealthy, it's what we've and just to comment on her excellent points, that and that's where it comes back to marketing too. It's not a case of saying this is healthy, this is good for you, now eat it. At the end of the day, people eat food because it's delicious. And even people who are poor, they want to eat delicious food. So making it delicious, and there's an image and trend around it. It's not just a good product as well. And we see that with big marketing companies. So it's about changing the image. It's about making it exciting. And actually that Nestle example with Cerelac is really a brilliant example. So I'm glad Dr. Habiba brought that up, because I talked to Nestle probably about 10 years ago in West Africa, where they were replacing the wheat with the pearl millet in the Cerelac. And they said the first reaction from the consumers was very negative. And they didn't want the pearl millet Cerelac because there was an image of imported wheat being more superior. And I'm sure it's not the babies that actually didn't like it. It was the adults, and it was an image issue. And Nestle said they were going to persist through marketing to try to change that impression and perception. So yeah, marketing's critical. But the last point's that a lot of the forgotten foods and millets are naturally healthier for the environment with the way they're grown. That can change too. It can change to monocropping. It can change to having non-regenerative processes, production processes. So we have to be careful. And my last point was, yes, they're very nutritious and healthy, but just like you can get greenwashing, you can get nutrition washing as well, which means that I've seen in many countries they might promote millet muesli. If you read the detail on the back, which very, very few consumers do, there's 2% millet in it. Or there's so many additives and preservatives, or high in sugar, fat, and salt. There's a lot of, especially in India, there's a lot of fantastic millet products on the market. And you can make anything taste good if you want to have high levels of sugar, fat, and salt, whether it be a recipe or a processed product. And we were looking at one stage of how we have, it's not really certification, because certification becomes often not affordable and complex for SMEs, but more a support to them. And then they could use the umbrella brand of Smart Food as long as they fulfill certain criteria. And then you could help them purchase direct from farm, make sure things are, because you talked about traceability, how you could use the traceability as well to help with ensuring that the end product is a good product, whether it be a menu item on your app or whether it be a processed product. Okay, so that's as many ideas I could put down, and I tried not to say too much. So I'm open for branding Smart Food. It was about creating something positive and something someone might want to aim for. Food as Medicine targets a different audience, but I mean, it's good as well, because we did a really large consumer study in India, probably 10 years ago now. So we did 15,500 face-to-face interviews in 7 cities. It was huge. And when we said, why do you eat millets? The biggest number one reason why people ate millets was, I have a health problem. Like they had diabetes, or they were overweight, or something. There was a reason, a health reason why they were eating millets. So what we found, and it didn't mean this is where you should necessarily target, but what we found is the early adopters, or the easier group to target, were people who had a health problem. Then we found the second group to target were the people who were health and fitness conscious. Now, we found a lot of those people weren't aware about the value of millets, but they were interested. So they were in the next sort of target audience that would take up the millets. And then, of course, the challenge is how you then go to the next level and get more of the mass market. Now, that doesn't mean that's what works where you are or where you should target, but that's an example of what influenced us. But we didn't want millets to be seen as, the food for the sick people. So there's a delicate balance. I believe you have to leverage the health benefits, but don't focus solely on that. You still got to create an exciting image. And that's where your recipes or processed products, if they can be done in a modern, exciting way, that doesn't mean it loses the identity of the past, but it's modernizing it, making it look fresh and new and exciting. That needs to come along with the health benefits. Yeah. And actually, I'll just mention, just really quickly, there was a really good study that World Vegetable Centre did in Africa. I think it was in East Africa, where they ran 2 types of marketing campaigns. One was about eat your vegetables or your children will get sick. And the other one was, if you give your children the vegetables, they'll be strong and fit and healthy and run and all that, to see which one was more impactful. So anyone want to guess which they thought might be more? So it was the positive one that was more impactful. So how you make something exciting and positive